He ran over a lady selling vegetables and discovered something that would change their lives forever. Renaud was speeding down the road, driving 50 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone, his heart pounding between anxiety and excitement. He wasn't just running late, he was late for the most important meeting of his life, a $300 million deal. Every second felt like a missed opportunity slipping through his fingers. His mind was racing faster than the car, consumed with numbers, potential, and the kind of success that could change everything forever. You could feel the crushing pressure he carried. Pressure only those standing at the edge of greatness truly understand. On the other end of the line, Renaud's business partner was trembling with nerves, only adding to the tension consuming the entrepreneur. His voice cracked as he emphasized the importance of every minute, how everything was on the line, and how there was no room for mistakes. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the result of years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and risky decisions. Imagine the weight of that on your back, where every call and every message could change everything. When you build something big, even the smallest misstep can lead to disaster. In the middle of that chaos, a truth stood out clearly. Success doesn't come through recklessness, and rushing blindly can lead to the worst mistakes. One wrong move, 1 second of distraction, and the future can come crashing down. Renaud's story mirrors the reality of many, where ambition drives us to act hastily, but the road to greatness demands patience, focus, and awareness. What happened next wasn't just about speed. It was a moment that would challenge everything he believed about control and destiny. Renaud was so focused on the GPS that he didn't see Dona Rosa crossing the street. She was returning from the clinic, picking up her medication. In a flash, the car couldn't brake in time, and the impact was unavoidable. The basket of vegetables she was carrying flew into the air, scattering fruits and greens across the sidewalk, while the medicine shattered on the pavement. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. Fear and shock washed over everyone involved. It's incredible how life can change in the blink of an eye, when we least expect it. Desperate, Renaud jumped out of the car and ran to help, panic tightening his chest. The guilt was instant. He knew his rush and distraction had caused the accident. But what caught his attention wasn't her injuries or even the scattered medicine. It was her eyes. Calm, not worried about herself, but about the vegetables on the ground. That basket was her livelihood. It was as if those vegetables represented the fragile line between survival and despair. In that moment, he saw a silent strength, a kind of resilience rarely witnessed. As he helped her gather the vegetables, Renaud realized that her entire world was in that little basket. To most people, vegetables are just food, but for Rosa, they were survival, dignity, and hope for a better day. It was a powerful reminder. In the middle of chaos, what really matters might be something simple, something many of us overlook in our daily rush. That moment shook him deeply. Something inside began to shift, even though he didn't yet understand the depth of the transformation. Renaud stared at the spilled basket on the ground, thinking it wasn't even worth $50, an amount that meant nothing in his millionaire routine. To him, those vegetables had always been insignificant. But now, in the middle of this simple accident, he began to see something he had never truly understood. For Dona Rosa, those vegetables meant hunger or a guaranteed meal. They were the edge between dignity and desperation. That realization stirred something inside him, an emotion he had long ignored. As he picked up each vegetable with care, Renaud felt the weight of a brutal reality, one far removed from his world of luxury and million-dollar meetings. He had never been this close to such raw truth, where every cent and every piece of produce was vital for survival. In that moment, his world and hers collided on an invisible bridge made of empathy and understanding. He began to realize that success wasn't just about money. It was about seeing the true value of things, and of people. It was there, among scattered vegetables and broken medicine, that a seed of empathy started to grow inside Renaud. It wasn't pity, nor shallow charity. It was something real. A genuine connection. An acknowledgement that these lives, these people, were real and full of challenges he had never faced. And this new perspective, born from an unexpected accident, was about to change the way he saw the world, and himself, forever. As he continued helping, Dona Rosa noticed something that caught her attention, a scar on Renaud's hand. It was a mark she recognized immediately, not just by appearance, but by meaning. The shape and position of the scar matched perfectly with the one her son had. The son who had disappeared years ago, a wound in her heart that had never fully healed. With tearful eyes, she called out his name, her voice trembling with emotion, a mixture of hope and disbelief, as if clinging to a dream long lost. Renaud, confused and overwhelmed by her reaction, tried to calm her down, saying he didn't know what she was talking about. But Rosa insisted, with a certainty that pierced through time and pain, like the scar itself was telling a story he had forgotten. That moment felt like a crack in the wall he had built around himself, a doorway to buried memories, to secrets he didn't even know he carried. It's astonishing how a single mark can carry so much emotional weight, holding stories that refuse to be forgotten. Amidst the growing tension, one more detail stood out, a small pendant Renaud wore around his neck. It was an old keepsake, something he'd always worn without really knowing why. For him, it was just a necklace with no meaning. But for Rosa, it sparked something deeper. Memories, questions, a mystery that hung heavy in the air. Sometimes it's these small things that hold the deepest truths, the ones that shake our understanding of everything we thought we knew. Rosa leaned in to get a better look. Her eyes locked on the inscription etched into the little star-shaped pendant, "Miguel, with love, Mom." In that instant, the world stood still. Renaud froze, the shock hitting him like a blow. The possibility that he could be Rosa's long-lost son unleashed a tidal wave of emotions he couldn't control. It was one of those moments that defies logic and leaves you breathless, where everything suddenly feels forever changed. Tears began to stream down Rosa's face as she held Renaud's hands, her grip trembling with a mix of hope, fear, and a long-suppressed love. Renaud, in turn, felt his legs weaken and his heart race, as if he were trapped in a surreal dream he wasn't sure he wanted to wake up from. Time seemed to slow down, as if the entire universe was holding its breath in front of a revelation powerful enough to change their lives forever. It was the beginning of a new journey, a story yet to be written. Dona Rosa took a deep breath, searching for the strength to tell the story she had carried in her heart for so long. She began to reveal how she lost her son, Miguel, when he was just 7 years old. On that tragic night, an electric heater had sparked a fire that quickly consumed their home, turning everything into ashes and ruin. The flames moved too fast, and in the chaos, Miguel vanished without a trace. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind an emptiness no amount of time could fill. Rosa and Carlos, her husband at the time, threw themselves into a desperate search that lasted months, then years, clinging to the hope they would find him again. They searched shelters, hospitals, police stations, any lead that could bring their son back. But the silence grew heavier each day, slowly draining their strength and tearing apart the family. The pain of loss was more than just sorrow, it was a black hole that devoured everything around it, leaving deep scars and invisible wounds. The fire didn't just destroy the house, it shattered the very foundation of their family, turning them into strangers bound only by grief. Rosa carried in her chest the weight of guilt, regret, and an ache that never faded. As she told the story, her voice thick with emotion, it became clear just how deeply the past still haunted them, and how that tragedy had shaped the lives that were now, in an unexpected twist of fate, about to reunite. But even in the darkness, a light was beginning to flicker, bringing questions that begged for answers. As Rosa shared each painful detail, Renaud felt like he was adrift in a sea of emotions, bracing himself for truths that would turn his world upside down. Then, Dona Rosa looked closely at him and, with a steady voice, began describing another scar, one only a mother would remember. She spoke of a small mark behind his ear, the result of a childhood bike accident, something Renaud barely remembered, but the scar was there, etched into his skin like a forgotten memory. That small, precise detail sent both of their hearts racing. It was a silent recognition, an unspoken bond, perhaps the final piece needed to confirm a long-buried truth. Renaud held his own hand, struggling to take it all in, while Rosa held onto his with firm conviction. "You're my Miguel," she said, with a certainty that allowed no doubt. It was a moment charged with emotion, where past and present collided in a wave of overwhelming feelings and renewed hope. And yet, deep inside, he hesitated, wondering if it was all just a cruel coincidence. some twist of fate playing with his deepest fears and longings. Fear of the unknown, of making a mistake, clouded Rena's thoughts. Sensing his uncertainty, Rosa offered something concrete. Let's take a DNA test. That simple, direct proposal opened the door to truth, making it clear that only science could confirm what their hearts already suspected. It was the step they needed to face reality, even if it meant their lives could be turned completely upside down. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, as if the whole world were waiting for the next chapter of this incredible story to unfold. And in that moment, as the two prepared for what lay ahead, Rena knew there was no turning back. The search for truth had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. Rena scheduled the DNA test with his private doctor, who also ran additional tests on Rosa after the fall she had taken during the accident. It seemed like a simple step, but it carried a weight far beyond the surface. As he waited, a mix of anxiety and hope took over his mind, a storm of emotions unlike anything he had ever experienced. To him, that appointment wasn't just about genetic confirmation, it was about finding answers to questions buried deep within his past. Each second dragged by, time slowing down as if making room for something monumental to arrive. Meanwhile, Rosa entered the clinic beside the man who might be her long-lost son, the Miguel she had never stopped searching for. It was a moment thick with silence, emotion, and unspoken dreams. As the sun began to set outside, they left the building together, walking side by side, crossing between two very different worlds. Hers, marked by struggle and simplicity, and his, built on numbers and multi-million-dollar deals. That walk symbolized something far greater than words, a delicate beginning to something new and unknown. For the first time in his life, Rena wasn't thinking about money, deals, or deadlines. What filled his heart now was something deeper, a sincere desire to care for and protect Rosa, that woman who, despite everything, had become an essential part of his life. He realized he didn't need to wait for the DNA results to act. This moment already felt like a reunion of souls, a real chance to rebuild what time had nearly destroyed. His heart began to beat in rhythm with hope and love. Rena stepped into the modest home where Rosa lived. It was simple, yet filled with an invisible richness, one that only love and endurance can create. She led him into a small room, its walls covered in old photographs where time seemed to stand still. There were pictures of him, from ages 2 to 7, capturing moments of pure innocence, playing in the yard, smiling with childhood joy, hugging his parents with unfiltered love. Each photo told a story he never knew existed. As he looked at the photos, a lump formed in his throat. Those memories were silent witnesses to a life he had unknowingly left behind, yet Rosa had kept them alive for over 3 decades with hope and care. That humble little room had become a shrine, a sanctuary of remembrance that defied time and sorrow. It showed him the power of a love that endures absence, forgetfulness, and pain. What overwhelmed Rena in that moment was a profound mix of sorrow and gratitude. He felt the weight of everything that had been lost, and the warmth of a love he never expected to find. It was an invitation to start again, to repair what fate had broken. And as he stood among those photos and memories, he realized he was face to face with something greater than himself, a connection that defied time and circumstance. And in that stillness, wrapped in emotion and silence, a new journey was quietly beginning, one filled with challenges, but also with hope, and with possibilities yet to be revealed. Rena looked into Rosa's eyes and, with all the sincerity in his heart, offered to take care of her, to try to make up for the years that time had stolen. For him, it wasn't just a gesture. It was a deep, inner need to right the past and build a different future. Rosa, with a gentle smile, replied that she didn't want charity. All she wanted was to know that he was safe and well, showing that her pride and dignity remained unshaken despite all the hardship. It was an invitation to a new kind of relationship, one built on respect and true, unwavering affection. But Rena didn't give up. He insisted that what he felt went far beyond obligation or duty. It was love, a genuine, growing emotion that was taking root in his heart. That simple yet powerful declaration opened a space for something real to bloom between them, nourished by truth and hope. That moment felt like a seed planted in fertile soil, ready to grow and transform their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. With every word, every gesture, Renaud could feel something shifting deep within him. For the first time, he could envision a place where he truly belonged, not a place of contracts or corporate ambition, but a home. A home not measured by walls or material comfort, but by a feeling of belonging, of warmth, of love. That growing feeling gave him strength, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. And as that connection deepened, both knew they were only at the beginning of a journey that would demand bravery, forgiveness, and above all, the willingness to rebuild a bond that time had never truly erased. Renaud woke early the next morning, anxiety and a long-lost hope churning inside him. It felt like a turning point, a day that might change everything. To mark the moment, he bought Rosa's favorite breakfast, a simple gesture, yet full of meaning. When he arrived at her house, he found her wearing the nicest clothes she owned, as if her body, too, needed to be dressed for what was coming. The air was charged with a unique energy, silence wrapped in nervousness and expectation as both tried to contain the emotion bubbling inside. It wasn't just about a test, it was about the chance to rebuild something, to heal ancient wounds and begin a new chapter. Every passing minute seemed to stretch time itself, as their hearts beat fast, hopeful and fearful all at once. That waiting was a test of faith, patience, and quiet strength. Renaud realized that despite the fear of the unknown, something inside him was beginning to awaken, a genuine hope, a true desire to believe that life could still be rewritten. Rosa, with a shy smile, held his hands tightly, as if together they could withstand any answer. They knew the results might change everything, but deep down, they also knew what was growing between them was already a kind of victory. And as the clock ticked against their patience, their story stood silently, waiting to be fully revealed. Moved by genuine concern, Renaud looked at Rosa with tenderness and said, almost like a plea, "Why don't you come stay with me until the results arrive?" He knew that in that tiny room she called home, she lacked the comfort and care she deserved. More than anything, he wanted to protect her. It wasn't a gesture of pity. It came from a deeper place, an unspoken desire to care for this woman who had, in such a short time, become part of him. The invitation carried more than good intentions. It was a first concrete step toward a new bond. Rosa hesitated. Her eyes revealed the internal battle between the pride of someone who had learned to survive alone and the deep, silent yearning to finally be cared for. Accepting help wasn't easy, especially from someone who might be the child she lost, and found again in a story too tangled to yet feel real. But there was something in Renaud's gaze, contained sweetness, unwavering respect, that quieted every fear. Deep down, she felt she could trust him. And that was already more than she'd had in a very long time. By saying yes, Rosa stepped not only into his house, but into a new chapter of her life. And Renaud felt something inside himself shift too. For the first time, his home no longer felt like a symbol of wealth, but like a space where a story of love, pain, and reunion might finally begin. And as they waited together for the truth to arrive, their shared days began weaving invisible threads, stronger than blood. As Rosa crossed the threshold into Renaud's home, her eyes widened in awe. The space was beautiful, spacious, serene, so far from everything she had ever known. But it wasn't the luxury that touched her, it was the details. A folded blanket on the sofa, a cup of tea waiting, soft music humming in the background. Every element seemed to whisper care. The house, once cold, now felt like it had opened its arms to welcome her. She walked slowly, as if afraid it might all vanish. She ran her fingers along the wood of the staircase, paused to study the art on the walls, and finally stopped at a cozy chair near the window. Sitting gently, as though afraid to disturb something sacred, she took a long, steady breath. Renaud watched her from a distance, not rushing, just being there. For the first time, there was no hurry, only presence. The tears came quietly, uninvited. Not of sadness, but of deep relief, as though decades of pain and absence had finally found a resting place. Rosa couldn't remember the last time she felt so seen, so welcomed. And in that moment, more than the comfort of the home, it was Renaud's quiet care that made her feel like she might, finally, be coming home. The next morning, Renaud surprised Rosa with a gesture so simple, yet so full of meaning. He led her to the guest room he'd prepared, a warm, peaceful space with fresh flowers by the bedside and a delicately embroidered quilt. On the bed, folded with care, were a few new pieces of clothing, light dresses, a soft coat, comfortable slippers. Nothing extravagant. But every item seemed chosen with love. Rosa was speechless. She ran her hands over the fabric, trembling slightly, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen, remembered, honored. She looked up at Renaa, and in her gaze was more than gratitude. It held the weight of absence, and the beauty of love reborn after years of silence. "You didn't have to," she murmured, her voice tight with emotion. "I know," he replied, smiling softly. "But I wanted to." For the first time in years, Rosa felt like someone's daughter again. And in that small, quiet gesture, new clothes folded atop a freshly made bed, something was born that was stronger than time. The certainty that love has the power to begin again, even after 1,000 endings. The next morning, seated on the veranda, Rosa and Renaa shared breakfast. Sunlight filtered softly through the trees, and the smell of warm bread filled the air. Their conversation was light, peppered with laughter and half-remembered memories. Then, in a moment of quiet distraction, Rosa looked at him with tenderness and said, "Miguel, pass me the sugar?" The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Rosa froze, realizing what she'd said, but she didn't take it back. Renaa, stunned, felt a lump form in his throat. It hadn't sounded like a slip. It had sounded true, like a name spoken by someone who knew it deep in her soul. He said nothing, just handed her the sugar, eyes misted with emotion. That moment, so simple, so human, shattered the last walls of doubt. Renaa didn't know if the DNA would confirm the blood tie. But that name, said with love, stirred a truth inside him. A bond had already been born in the heart. That night, in the quiet of the living room, Renaa opened up like never before. His voice was low, his gaze distant. He spoke of the years in the orphanage, the nights spent crying in silence, the constant ache of being forgotten by someone he didn't even know. "I grew up believing no one wanted me," he said, his eyes brimming. "That I was disposable." Rosa listened in silence, her chest tight, the weight of guilt heavy on her shoulders. She gripped his hand tightly, as if trying to piece together all the years that time had stolen. "I never stopped looking for you, Miguel. For 30 years, I searched." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they brought something just as powerful, the comfort of being remembered. In that intimate, heart-wrenching moment, mother and son laid bare their wounds. The very pain that had torn them apart for decades now became the thread that bound them. It was as if every tear falling in that room washed away a little of the sadness they'd carried for so long. And in that fragile space between sorrow and silence, something new began to bloom. A healing only a reunion could bring. Driven by the need to understand what really happened, Rosa and Renaa decide to visit the doctor who treated him when he first arrived at the orphanage, still just a boy. The clinic is simple, old, steeped in memories and the faint smell of a distant past. The doctor, now an elderly man with white hair, greets them with surprise and emotion. He remembers Miguel, or rather, Renaa, as a frightened child, with visible wounds, and others hidden deep within his soul. Then, during their conversation, a revelation changes everything. The boy had been found after suffering a serious fall. He had hit his head hard. At the time, he was confused, disoriented, with no memory, and no identification. The blow could have caused temporary, or even permanent, amnesia, the doctor explains. That piece of information makes everything fall into place. The sudden disappearance, the absence of childhood memories, the persistent feeling of emptiness inside Renaa. Rosa holds back her tears. It's as if, at last, a vital piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. The lost boy she had searched for so desperately may have been right there all along, unaware of who he truly was. For Renaa, the pain slowly gives way to something fragile, but real, hope. Maybe he hadn't been abandoned. Maybe he had just gotten lost. And now, finally, he was beginning to be found. Before they leave, the doctor rummages through a box of old records carefully stored in a dusty cabinet. After a few minutes, he finds an aged file, marked by time but still readable. Inside are detailed notes from when the boy first arrived at the shelter, estimated age, physical description, health status. And one crucial detail, the boy had repeated the name Rosa several times before his memory faded completely. Rosa shivers at the sound of it. That small detail, buried for decades in a nearly forgotten piece of paper, reignites a hope they barely dared to feel. Renaud holds the file as if it were a long-lost piece of himself. "This could be the key," the doctor says with an encouraging look. "Maybe you're closer to the truth than you think." Hearts racing, Rosa and Renaud leave the clinic carrying more than just an old document. They carry a new perspective. Now more than ever, they believe their story might still lead to a real and final reunion. That night, the house is silent. Rosa lays in bed with her Bible pressed against her chest, holding it like an anchor in the middle of a storm. Her lips move in whispered prayers, asking God, no matter the result, not to let her lose him again. Not after everything. Her mother's heart beats with equal parts faith and fear. Renaud sits quietly in the corner chair, watching. He can't sleep. The bond they've built in these past few days has become too real to be broken by a piece of paper. He fears the test will say no, and that no will be louder than the love they've found. In his own quiet way, he also prays that destiny won't tear them apart. Time feels frozen. Because what's coming in the morning isn't just a DNA result. It's the weight of a life, a fractured story, and the possibility of a new beginning. Both of them silently wish, from the depths of their souls, that this bond goes beyond biology. And that somehow, God confirms what their hearts already know. The doctor's office falls into absolute silence as he lowers his eyes and says, softly, "The test came back negative." Rosa's world collapses in an instant. Her knees give out, her heart races, and she faints, powerless in the face of the pain erupting inside her. Renaud rushes to catch her, desperate, feeling like he's just lost something he never even knew he had. When she wakes, her tear-filled eyes meet his. No words are needed. They both know the bond they've created cannot be explained by blood or DNA. It runs deeper. It's real. Renaud holds her hand tightly and says, with steady conviction, "You may not be my mother by blood, but you're the woman who taught me what it means to have one." There, between quiet tears and silent embraces, they realize, love isn't measured in lab results. The love that brought them together, even if only briefly, now exists forever. Even without a biological link, what they built can't be undone. They may have lost a truth, but they found a family. After Rosa collapses, she is rushed to the hospital. Between scans and machines, the doctors deliver a devastating diagnosis. Advanced heart failure. The warning is clear, she must have complete rest. No stress. None. Renaud feels his chest tighten. He can't bear the thought of losing her. Not now. Not after everything. Sitting at her bedside, he gently holds her hand. Rosa tries to smile, but fatigue paints her face. Even so, her eyes shine with gratitude for not being alone. The simple hospital room is heavy with unspoken promises of care, of presence, of love. Renaud speaks with the doctors, arranges everything, and makes a decision. She will not go through this alone. He commits to being there, for every appointment, every day, every step of the way. Touched by his words, Rosa becomes emotional. For the first time in years, she feels she has somewhere to return to. Someone to call her son, even if DNA says otherwise. Renaud holds her hands firmly, looking deep into her tired eyes, and says through tears, "You may not be my mother by blood, but you are my mother at heart." Those words, heavy with sincerity and love, shattered any invisible walls doubt may have left behind. There was no more room for uncertainty. What stood there now was a promise, made with the full strength of his being. Tears streamed silently down Renaud's face as he reaffirmed, "I will never leave you again. You'll never face this alone." It was more than a vow. It was a pact of presence, of care, of unconditional love. He wanted Rosa to feel a safety she had never known, to be sure that, from now on, she would have a son by her side to weather any storm. Rosa, emotional and vulnerable, squeezed his hand with a shy, hope-filled smile. Even without the biological proof, she knew she had found something far greater. A true son, by soul and by heart. That moment sealed a bond neither time nor science could undo. A reunion that transcended biology and became eternal. And so, in that humble hospital room, a new family was born. Not forged by blood, but by the power of love and the conscious choice to stay, no matter the cost. Renaud listened intently, feeling the full weight of the revelation. This was more than just a piece of paper. It was the key that could unlock everything, a chance to finally understand the missing pieces of a story that had never felt complete. As he heard Rosa recount what had happened, something stirred deep within him. A calling. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't let fear delay the reunion they both had dreamed of for so long. With renewed determination, Renaud stood up and promised Rosa they would follow every lead in that letter. That together, they would face whatever it took to uncover the truth. It was a pivotal moment, one where past and present collided to light the path forward. And so, with hearts full of courage, they began a journey that could once again change everything. With the mysterious letter in hand and a clear purpose in his heart, Renaud took action. He knew that finding Miguel, Rosa's biological son, would require help. Specialized help. Without hesitation, he hired private investigators with experience in sensitive and long-cold cases. But it wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was an act of love. A way to help Rosa reclaim what time and fate had taken from her. For Renaud, this mission went far beyond doing a favor. It was his way of giving back. Of showing that love, even without confirmed blood ties, demands real, tangible action. As the detectives launched their search, Renaud remained steadfast at Rosa's side, sharing each flicker of hope, every shadow of doubt. This wasn't just a quest to find a name or an address. It was a journey that deepened the bond they had been building, solidifying the belief that together, they could face anything. And so, with courage and patience, they took the first step into a chapter that had once seemed lost to time. A chapter that still held secrets, and maybe, just maybe, the reunion of a lifetime. After days of tireless investigation, the detectives finally located Miguel in the city of New Jersey. The news struck like a lightning bolt of hope into the hearts of Rosa and Renaud. Miguel was alive, married, with children, living a quiet life, far from the past that had once connected them. He had no idea about the history that surrounded him, no idea of the mother who had never stopped searching, or the man now reaching out to him with such tenderness and urgency. When Renaud finally contacted Miguel, he felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. With a steady voice filled with respect, he told him everything. The pain of loss, the decades-long search, the unlikely bond that had taken root. Miguel listened in silence, processing each word. Though he didn't recognize the story, he didn't shut the door. Instead, he left it slightly open, allowing the first glimmer of connection to shine through. That phone call was more than a conversation. It was a bridge between distant worlds, an invitation to rebuild stories, to heal old wounds, to forge new bonds where broken ones once lived. For Rosa and Renaud, it was proof. Hope, even when nearly extinguished, can still light the way forward. And with hearts full of emotion and anticipation, they prepared to take the next step on a journey that had only just begun. Miguel, still reeling from the story he'd just heard, felt a mix of curiosity and emotion he couldn't contain. He knew the time had come to face the past, to meet, in person, the woman who had searched for him for decades. With his heart pounding, he boarded a flight back to the city where it had all begun, ready for a moment that would forever change his life. At the airport, Renaud waited anxiously, his chest tight with hope and emotion. And then, finally, Miguel appeared. The two men locked eyes. They studied each other quietly, as if searching for something beyond appearance. And then, without hesitation, they embraced. Like brothers who had never been apart. That single gesture said more than words ever could. In that embrace were the missing pieces of a fractured history, and the beginning of something entirely new. It was more than a reunion. It was love. It was hope. It was the will to start again. And so, a new chapter unfolded, one filled with endless possibility, and the courage to embrace it. When Rosa finally laid eyes on Miguel after all those years of aching hope, her body gave out. She fell to her knees, overcome by a wave of emotion too powerful to hold back. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of relief and joy, too deep for words. Time seemed to pause. It was as if every sorrow, every unanswered prayer, dissolved in that single moment of reunion. Miguel, moved to his core, knelt beside her and wrapped his arms around her. Tightly, tenderly, as if no time had passed, as if nothing had ever come between them. In that embrace lived not only their reunion, but the miracle of a bond that had survived against all odds. The world around them faded, and all that remained was the sacredness of that moment, where pain was replaced by healing, and the past was rewritten with love. It was more than physical reunion. It was the mending of souls, the beginning of a future they would build together. Miguel looked into Rena's eyes with a gratitude too deep for words. With a sincere smile, he said, "Thank you for taking care of my mother with such dedication and love." And in that instant, it was clear. There was more than blood between them. There was something greater. Rena wasn't just the man who had appeared in their lives. He was now a brother, not by birth, but by heart. Their gestures, their words, sealed that new bond. A brotherhood chosen, forged in kindness, respect, and love. Their connection grew stronger by the day, built on trust, loyalty, and the unspoken understanding of what family truly means. This chosen brotherhood was living proof. Family isn't just biology. It's presence. It's commitment. It's love that stays. And so, with hearts full and peace at last, they realized the family they had longed for was finally whole. The past, with all its confusion and gaps, no longer mattered. What mattered now was this new story, the one they were writing together. And as life continued its course, a new chapter opened before them, one of love, unity, and the kind of healing only family can bring. In the months that followed, Rosa found a peace that had once seemed unreachable. Surrounded by her two sons, Rena, who had become both brother and father, and Miguel, her long-lost child, she lived each day with dignity and a serene smile. The love that bound them filled every corner of the house and every crevice of their hearts, transforming what had once been pain into a profound, quiet gratitude. She walked slowly through the rooms, savoring the small moments that had once gone unnoticed. The conversations around the table, the gentle touch of her son's hands, the smell of morning coffee, everything carried a new, deeper meaning. Rosa knew her time was drawing near, but for the first time in her life, she felt whole, held, cherished, and loved, as she had always deserved. The pain that had marked her journey for decades now gave way to a rare serenity, as if every tear and every battle had prepared the ground for this final season of fullness. She slept peacefully, knowing she had finally found what she'd spent a lifetime searching for: a home, a family, and a love that transcended every barrier. Even in her final days, Rosa continued to teach those around her the true meaning of strength, forgiveness, and inner peace. At the break of a calm, quiet morning, Rosa passed away with a gentle smile on her lips, as if accepting life in its entirety and surrendering her last breath in peace. The silence that filled the house seemed to honor the strength of the woman who, despite so many adversities, had never lost her faith or her ability to love. Her departure was not just an end, but the closing of a chapter filled with meaning, redemption, and grace. At the funeral, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances gathered to pay their final respects. Each one brought with them a piece of Rosa's story, her courage in the face of suffering, her unwavering faith, and her generous heart that had always beat for her family and her community. Their heartfelt words painted the portrait of a woman who, even in silence, had been a living example of resilience and unconditional love. Through tears and bittersweet smiles, her story touched everyone in attendance, leaving a lasting mark on those who had the privilege of knowing her. Rosa wasn't just a memory from the past. She was a legacy of hope, strength, and humanity that would live on in the lives of those she loved and who loved her. And so, with heavy hearts but souls full of gratitude, they said goodbye to the woman who taught them that even in the fiercest storms, love always finds a way.